And network functions virtualization is evolving quickly, and Mobile World Congress is a great opportunity to follow the progression in the network virtualization space. On this panel, brought to you by Genband, are four leaders in the NFV space. On the end of the panel is Sanjay Bhatia. He's Vice President of Solutions Marketing and Strategy at Genband. Next to Sanjay is Charlie Ashton. He's Director of Business Development at Wind River. We also have Rajesh Gadiar. He's Senior Director of Architecture and Systems Engineering at Intel. And next to me is Anshu Agarwal. She's Head of Solutions and Partner Development at HPE. And panelists, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Genband, for putting this together.
Sure, Abe. Nice being with you.
HPE, Intel, Wind River, Genband, all collaborating to really realize network functions virtualization. Sanjay, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Tell me about the collaboration and what has evolved since the last time we were here last year.
Well, I mean, clearly, our collaboration as an ecosystem continues, right? We work together pretty closely on various fronts and taking differentiated NFV solutions to our service provider customers. So we've been working very closely over the last year and bringing out new differentiated solutions in many different areas.
Yeah, as we talk to service providers in this industry about the key business challenges that they're facing, one of the things that's really important to them is to avoid any risk of vendor lock-in. They kind of had that before, when networks were built on physical infrastructure. So for them, it's very critical to be able to deliver, end-to-end solutions that are based on multi-vendor configurations and multi-vendor architectures. So for us at Wind River, collaboration with ecosystem partners is absolutely critical. And of course, through the Titanium Cloud ecosystem that we have, we collaborate with partners such as Genband and Intel Security, and then of course our customers are companies like HPE.
So Abe, our collaboration revolves around four pillars. So we have a lot of collaboration going on in the open source and open standards community, which Intel has always been a very strong proponent of. So we actually collaborate with everybody in the open standards like HCNFV and OPNFV, and also open source communities like DPDK and virtual switching and OpenStack and so on. Our second focus area is what we call as the Network Builders program, which has actually grown over the last couple of years and has more than 240 partners at this point. The third one is where we actually work with all our partners in creating reference architectures for the different NFV solutions, because that is a key way of really enabling solutions in the marketplace. And last one is actually our partnership here extends all the way to the comm service providers or the telco operators in terms of how we get accelerated deployments and really move NFV into real deployments.
So HPE provides network infrastructure virtualization and also the orchestration solutions. But what we pride most about HPE is the ecosystem that we have built. We have one of the best ecosystem that we have put together with partners like Genband, Wind River, and Intel. And we realize that no single vendor can take this NFV journey. And we need the partners to be there for the success that we can achieve together in this NFV journey.
Rajesh, you mentioned open source software initiatives. What are really the challenges in that area, and how do you really differentiate yourself as a company from the rest of the industry?
Our focus more recently has been really getting to deployments, and so we've taken an approach where obviously, we want to actually work with the open source communities and drive a few key things from a technology enabling standpoint. But we know that actually for NFV to become real, there has to be a focus on commercial ecosystem, hardened solutions that are supported. And so we've actually taken a balanced approach where open source initiatives actually allow us to really get a broad enabling for technologies, particularly from an NFV infrastructure perspective. So I think things like DPDK, which has become the industry standard API of choice for packet processing these days, right? Things like virtual switching, things like enhanced platform awareness capabilities in OpenStack. So we obviously do a lot of that. But then we also actually focus on working with our partners in terms of creating real applications such as EPC stacks or virtual CPEs that are hardened, that are performant, and that are ready for deployment.
Challenges for Wind River and the open source software initiative?
So Wind River delivers a software virtualization platform called Titanium Cloud, which solves a number of key business challenges for service providers. The whole Titanium Cloud portfolio of products is all based on open source projects. It's based on KVM, Linux, OpenStack, Ceph, those kinds of projects. At the same time, we're fully compatible with all of the open standards that are important to the service providers. So our development methodology is, we downstream the standard open source projects, and then we harden them and we enhance them to fix some of the critical problems that are in the standard distributions. For example, the standard version of OpenStack does not deliver the security, the performance, or the reliability that you need for a telco environment. So our expert engineers do all of that hardening and all of that enhancement, and then as soon as we validate that the new code that we've generated really does solve critical customer problems, we upstream those patches back to the community so that everybody else in the industry can take advantage of them. So we're able to do that while retaining full compatibility with the open standards, and that's so important to the service providers because they want to avoid any risk of vendor lock-in. And by staying compatible with those open standards, then we enable them to avoid that risk.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, from a GenBand perspective, we clearly, we see the value behind open source initiatives. In fact, we utilize things like DPDK from Intel pretty extensively, right? So open source, you get your community input, and there's quite a bit of value propositions there. But at the end of the day, each service provider needs to be able to differentiate. So where GenBand plays in the NFV architecture is at the VNF or application space, right? And that's where service providers actually create differentiated services. So we help our service provider customers create those differentiated solutions with some things like high performance media processing and transcoding for voice over LTE. And other applications, session border controllers. So we do some nice things in terms of multi-cloud deployments of VNFs, geo distribution. So those are some of the examples of how GenBand differentiates our offerings.
So open source is a great way of DevOps. But the service provider really needs to focus on providing services and not developing the software. So that's where a trusted vendor like HPE comes in, where we provide the software, support, and services. And by services, I mean as we started this journey almost 2 years ago, the NFV journey, and we've developed services around onboarding, which is a big pain point for service provider, and we can onboard, we can do performance characterization of different VNFs because this is a brave new world for every one of them. And the time to market has to be very, very short. So what services we bundle in along with the carrier grade features of say Wind River, OpenStack and other things like that, we provide those kind of support and services to the service provider.
Rajesh, of course, service providers are really launching real-world NFV-based applications. Can you talk or walk us through one of those maybe, and also talk about some of the challenges there?
Yeah, so that's a great question actually. So, the last couple of years has seen a lot of NFV momentum, and we are graduating from a lot of field trials to actual deployments. And this has actually been across the spectrum. So all the way from virtual CPE and SD-WAN deployments in the enterprise to Evolved Packet Core and even Cloud RAN deployments in the wireless core to virtual application delivery controllers, virtual firewalls, and virtual appliances in the cloud. And what I'm actually most excited about though is what the impending 5G transition holds and what that actually means for the industry, and also in preparation for 5G, what we have to do actually from an NFV perspective. And what I'm actually excited about is Anshu made a reference to it's really about services. And so when I look at that, and if you guys have actually come to our booth here, you would have seen the end-to-end services for IoT around autonomous driving and the autonomous, the software-defined industrial control, for example. And there are actually, very stringent latency and performance requirements around this. And so some of the things that we've been looking at is, applications like distributed EPC, and can you actually move things towards the network edge with a goal to actually offer some interesting services that are monetizable. Because remember, one of the key challenges that the service providers face is how do they actually make money? How do they actually grow their revenues? And so the 5G transition and what that actually means from a services perspective, particularly for IoT services, is something that I'm really excited about, and we are actively looking at things like distributed EPC that I mentioned, CUBs. We also have a FlexRAN platform that is allowing for innovations and a lot of flexibility in terms of creating new applications. And I think the coming couple of years, I expect actually a lot to happen in that space.
You talked about IoT and 5G, Charlie. How about virtual CPE?
We see a big trend towards the deployment of virtual CPE across a whole range of service providers during 2017. And I think the reason for that is that the business advantages are just compelling for delivering managed services to enterprises using a virtualized CPE platform. I mean, we saw one study that said that a typical service provider with about 100,000 customers, they could actually see increased revenues of $1.4 billion over a 5-year period. And at the same time, they could get operational cost reductions, close to 50%. So if you're a finance guy at a service provider, you're pretty happy when you see projections like that. There are some challenges though. I mean, if you're going to deploy managed services in a virtualized platform, you have to maintain the level of uptime that enterprises actually require. And at the same time, you have to, be able to deploy on a small footprint platform to meet the cost targets. And that's where we come in. Through our Titanium Cloud portfolio, we address those challenges. And actually we address them for two different deployment models. There's the industry is typically calling it now the thin client virtual CPE deployment model, when the virtualized functions actually run in the service provider POP or potentially the central office. Alternatively, there's the thick client deployment model where the virtualized services actually run at the customer premise. And we actually have a special version of the Titanium Cloud portfolio products for that second scenario, which is called Titanium Edge, where you can run on just 2 physical servers to minimize costs.
Sanjay, as far as NFV-based applications, what's the correspondence with real-time communications?
Yeah, that's a great question, Abe. So, in fact, this morning we announced DO, which is United Arab Emirates, service provider. They deployed our NFV-based session border controller. So. Clearly, we deal on the applications layer, session border controllers, voice over LTE services. We also offer, IoT and real-time communication kind of capability sets. And so those are the types of applications that GenBan offers on top of, the virtualized infrastructure that both HPE and Wind River provide, right? So clearly, what we are seeing is a clear need for, the service providers to be able to move on these so they can offer new services faster and quicker, and then DO is just an example of that. They're using it for interconnect type of services. So that's really what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Anshu, Rajesh brought up 5G and the correlation between 5G and NFV. From HPE's perspective, can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I also wanted to touch upon what Charlie mentioned. There has been significant momentum in virtual CPE in this last 1 year. But as Rajesh mentioned, the distributed EPC, and they're all contributing to the growth of 5G. So virtual EPC and virtual IMS, I'm really excited about them because they bring up new use cases like VoLTE, voice over Wi-Fi, that are becoming reality for lots of service providers, because the service providers actually need to move from being just a communication service provider to becoming a digital service provider, what I mean by that is they have to be able to launch new innovative services that generate top line revenue for them, but in a very agile and efficient manner. And that's what they have to be focused upon. And this new way of doing stuff in the 5G world gives them the ability to do that. And that's being done through the distributed EPC and IMS type solutions. But there are challenges that exist for a service provider, which are not technological challenges, but more on the organizational side, because they need to move from being, like, for example, they need to move, network admin needs to become a network programmer. So it's retooling and the retraining of the organization that they are being faced with.
That's an interesting segue into the next question I wanted to ask Sanjay. As far as telco cloud-based service offerings. What's the true benefit for the end customer? Really, maybe even on the consumer or on the business side.
Yeah, I mean that's really we forget that there's end consumers of the service, and that's the end consumer as you and I, or it could be businesses, right? And they're the ones that really will benefit from the service provider implementing their new quick services on the telco cloud, right? So things like let me give you an example that things Genban is deploying that provide a lot of value to the end customer. One of them is enhanced voice services for voice over LTE. So there's a new codec that 3GPP has introduced, which is called EVS, or Enhanced Voice Services Codec. And what that does is it provides high definition voice even beyond what's in the networks today, which is wideband AMR, and allows service providers to further differentiate that offer. And the way the end customer benefits is enables a clear, clean collaboration between people, right? And that's very important. At the end of the day, it's all about real-time communications. So that's one example. Another one is, in terms of businesses and how they're going to get new services quicker, faster, in terms of real-time communications, collaboration, IoT. At the end of the day, that's going to improve lives, right? So that's what's in it for the end customer overall.
I want to ask all four of you one final question, really sort of a futurist question about network functions virtualization and maybe what we think we could be talking about this time next year. Anshu, I'll start with you, we'll go down the line. What do you expect to be focusing on this time next year?
I really believe that mobile edge computing, which is more of in the IoT world, will actually see a significant momentum in terms of new applications. So we already see connected cars, smart cities, smart homes. They're really, really big projects. But I actually believe that there would be point applications that we will see in this next coming year that will take advantage of MEC and IoT type technologies.
Rajesh?
Yes, I agree with everything that Anshu said. I also think that NFV has become more and more real. And if you look at actually, where did NFV come from? What's the motivation? From a service provider standpoint, it's really about how do they actually get to some better cost efficiencies and better TCO equation, so save money. And then how do they actually open up the platform so the industry can really drive a faster innovation cycle and really deploy end-to-end services. So what allows them to make money, so save money and make money, right? And with what's happening over the next few years, Anshu talked about the 5G transition, IoT services, mobile edge computing. I think that's going to drive so much data traffic that you have to actually virtualize the network at a much faster rate, right? And it's happening now. I think over the next 2 years, I think same time next year, if I'm sitting here, I think we're going to be talking more about 5G, more about services, and I think there will be many more proof points in my mind about actual NFV deployments. So I'm really excited. This is exciting times for network virtualization.
I think there's a very interesting industry driver at the first part of next year. If you look at the calendar for Mobile World Congress next year, it actually starts the day after the closing ceremony from the Winter Olympics in Korea. So I think we'll be sitting around at this event next year and we'll be talking about how mobile edge computing and 5G really made the experience for the fans in those stadiums much more entertaining, much more interactive, and just overall a better experience.
Oh, those are great examples. What I think is going to happen is, voice over LTE is moving. There's 145 plus operators globally that have deployed, but you're going to start seeing NFV-based deployments accelerate quite a bit, right? Just do as an example that we just announced, but you're going to see more and more momentum on the existing network, and then of course moving forward, 5G and IoT, in terms of full NFV software-defined architecture-based deployments are just on the horizon. So I'm going to, it's just acceleration of the current networks that you're going to see implemented in NFV SDN.
Charlie, this time next year, we're going to call it the Olympic panel. So I'm just letting you know now. You were on the super panel last night. This is the Olympic panel. It's better.
Well, thanks for the invitation to come back. I look forward to it.
Thanks again for all of you being here. Again, HPE, Intel, Wind River, and again, thanks to our sponsor, Genban, for making this possible.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all our viewers out there, you can get all of our content on TI Now by going to tinow.org. So long.